Thank you everyone for joining us. This is the 14th webinar exploring the functionality of Powerproject. Previous webinars are on the Solid Support website, where you will also find the information on Powerproject online training courses. Remember that Solid Support can help with your Powerproject setup, templates, and code libraries. We have Solid Support Training Manager Darren Menard to take us through the demo today. So over to you, Darren.
Okay, good. Thank you, Hemant, for the introduction. Hello, everybody. So as I said, I am Darren Maynard. I'm the training manager with Solid Support. I'm speaking virtually from Gadigal country here. Today, I'm walking you through three major aspects of the software. As mentioned before, the webinar will be recorded, so you can always look back at what I demonstrate today. All right. So the first part of the webinar looks at the initial setup of the program file. This is a quick import from Microsoft Project, followed by applying the 8 core basic principles of programming. I've done some of the activities already to move quickly through the webinar. The second part of the webinar looks at how we add a baseline and do the statusing of the program. Again, I've done some of the activities to make it easier to demonstrate how it looks when the program file is all set up, ready for statusing and baselining. The third part of the webinar looks at how we add resources and cost to the program. We also look at resource and cost histograms. Okay, everyone. So let's get started with Powerproject. The key approach to working with Powerproject is to think of it as being a left-hand drive car versus a right-hand drive car. All right. So I usually use this quick programming checklist as my mental checklist whenever I'm working with any programs. This mental checklist helped me when I'm learning the software, after coming from the MSP project and Excel backgrounds. All right. So this checklist is also found on our website. It's often a part of the handouts I usually give when I'm in training, because it really helps people to just remember when they're programming, the activities that they need to be doing in that initial setup. All right. The first file I've opened is an incomplete construction file that I imported from MS Project. This software can import from Primavera P6 XML, XCR or ShortTrack, and MS Project XML or MPP file types. Usually, when I apply the construction templates, so if I'm importing, I usually import and I'll apply a construction template to get the code libraries and resources applicable to construction included in my program. All right. So the imported file here is a clean file, so it doesn't have everything added as yet. The software can add bigger files with more details, especially if you're moving your original files from another software, right? It is able to handle a large number of items of 20,000 to 40,000 line IDs in certain program files, unlike other competitors who does get a bit tricky to work with. When the moment you cross close over 3,000 line IDs, it starts to get a bit fuzzy, all right? Now, what you'll notice, again, with the software here, I have multiple tabs open. This allows me to move seamless through between each of the different files without having to stay on one window. So this second file here has been sequenced already. However, I want to make some changes so that you can see how we use that checklist. We start with the calendars. I want to change the calendar for the project from New South Wales 5-day public holidays only to the New South Wales 5-day public holidays plus shutdown days. Now, I know we may have people across, if I'm coming across from New Zealand, they may just basically work off a single New Zealand calendar, but you will have public holidays plus shutdown. We do have people across different Australian states and territories. It's the same thing applicable if I'm using one of the other states here. So I'm going to check the properties. So here I'm quickly checking if I have all the correct non-working days in the calendar. I'm adding that extra day on Christmas Eve in 2021. And I'm adding the Easter weekend in 2022. As well as in 2023. So I usually add my dates to a minimum of 12 months beyond the project estimated finish date. This is to account for preparing myself for forensic review on a later date, where if my program is being delayed, I actually have accounted for these non-working dates. Now I can print the calendar as a PDF if I need someone to review the dates for the program. So in this case, it's connected to my home printer, but I can also have it as a PDF and send it across for someone to review. And that's really handy to just able to see that calendar as well here. Okay, good. All right. So what I want to do here, I'm going to now make this this calendar, New South Wales 5-day PH plus ST, my default. I want to have a default across all existing views. All right. Now, by default here, when I initially had this program, as you can see here, it's assigned to the 5-day public holidays only calendar. So I'm going to select all of the tasks in my program. I'm going to drag this calendar onto the Gantt chart, and I'm going to assign it to the tasks. We're keeping the durations the same. Good. And as you can see here, it's been updated. Okay. Now, next, I'm using my checklist here. This is how I basically come across when moving, because similarly, we all know how to drive, but moving, say if you're in Australia, New Zealand, and we have to say drive in France, so the US, they drive on the opposite side of the road. It's just getting those settings in your head across there. Okay. I can set my project start date and date 0 here in the properties section of the file. I can also rename the project name and give it a short name and indicate who's a client. One of the perks of this is having a date 0 versus the imposed start is if you're trying to basically do a DNC, a design and construct job, and you want your date 0 to be in terms of site possession or commence work on site, you could then say everything before that as negative weeks or negative days so that you have a countdown. And that's an easier method than having to set up a constraint to set any other software where you have to do constraints and try to pull everything else. So this allows us to do that. So I am using my date 0 and in post start as the same date as the first Monday in June of 2021. And I can edit my names. These names are useful because they tell me the different tabs when I click on them, what I'm working for. And if I'm just going to put my client in here. These properties are important because they will come back, especially as we start doing printing. Now, I want to insert a task into the program. There are different methods to do that, but I would use a simple one. I want a final clean and defects rectification task inserted between the inspection and handover tasks. I select the handover task and right click. And I'm going to insert a bar and a blank space appears and I enter the name and duration of the task. Okay. Now, I want to remove the link between the final clean task and Now I want to link the final clean task between the inspection and handover tasks. So I'm going to remove the links between inspection and handover. This is going to be a default finish to start relationship to keep it easy. I'm using the quickest way for me, which is to type in. So here I'm going to just delete that. Good. And I'm going to use the quickest way for me, which is to just basically type in the logic. Because I'm coming across some different software at times. That's often how I remember it, so it allowed me to quickly move across. Now we can also use the add or delete links command icons as well. We have options for searching for the links in a larger program. Again, we will cover a lot more of that in our training sessions, but there are different ways to add a link to a task. And this, for me, I think is one of the most powerful parts of that software. When I'm working on a big program, 3,000 line IDs, and I need to search for that link, I can actually use this search bar function here versus scrolling up and down on the screen. Now, what I want to do as well, I want to quickly update my velocity allowance calculation. I'm going to change it to 0 days. I will do a quick reschedule. This reschedule is similar to those who are using coming from P6, all right? But now, if you're coming from MSP, you have an auto reschedule option. I prefer to keep it off to remind me that I'm in Powerproject. All right, so I'm going to just look here and see 10%. All right, I'm going to use about 10% of my on-site works to factor in my contingency allowance. All right, and I'm going to press F9 to reschedule. Voila, and we are done. Okay, that works. Now if I want to print, I want to make sure my view is spaced out neatly. So I'm going to probably just hide right now. This is all I need. Go view. And I'm just going to adjust that view to fit the entire window. Good, so that spreads it out there. There's also on your time scales as well. We have a couple of things that you can set up as well. We have up to about 10 rows you can use for your timescale properties. So that gets me more information, unlike the other software that probably gives you only 3. Okay, all right. Now, what I would do here as well, I'm going to edit the properties of the program. This feeds into my border file that I have for the program. All right, so this is it here. And I'm just going to change today's issue today. This issue client review, which date. So when I go details, all right, and what I have here is a border file is already set up for me that's stored on my computer. And if I have to preview this, this basically is my border file. The border file is a specific file made for it, and I can create a number of different border files to suit the requirements here. All right, good, and okay, good. Excellent. Now, so that was the first part of the webinar. All right, I was going to check, are there any questions that we have so far before I move on to the second part, which looks at about baselining and statusing. You can type it into the chat box and I can answer them as I go along, or we can wait at the end as well. Right. Okay, good, excellent. So, all right, let's get into the second part of that webinar. Now, I want to add a baseline to the program. Now, I've run my checklist already. I do have a forensic planning checklist, all right, and that ensures that I make sure there are no errors in the file. If there are any errors, we'll have to remove the baseline and fix those errors. Then we re-baseline. For this webinar, we assume that it has been checked. Now I go to the project tab. I select the baseline manager, Command, all right? I follow the steps in the dialog box to add a baseline to the program. So I'm just going to. One of the advantages of this software is that it has unlimited baselines. I can include a note about the baseline for future use. Today. Okay. All right. Close. Somebody use that. Now, the baseline is not shown unless I activate the show baseline command icon and the bar charts tool command script. So I'm going to activate it here. So you can see my baseline is actually showing. Okay. So you can see right here underneath here. Now, if I have more than one baseline, I can actually export it and import it again. I can share it. If you're bringing across from a P6 file, you could also import that baseline file from P6. So again, there's options available there. All right. Now, what I also want to do is I want to activate the progress period to show when I'm statusing. I go to the progress period. Good, so it is here. So this is my progress period date here. Excellent. So here I can go to the progress period section in the project view. I can choose when the status period is, right? So quickly show, so this P1, P2, and they see any different colors. The advantage of the software is that I can see the different statuses of the task for different periods, right? So I'm going to quickly enter. So again, what I've done here in this particular option, this is my version of that here, add in my percentage complete. Okay. So you can actually see here where my percentages entered. So what I've done, I've entered some quick percentage completes for different status periods. And we can see the different colors that show up when you're moving between the periods. Now, this is advantageous when you need to track the progress over multiple periods. This was also, will also save the files to rebaselining, right? So there's a whole process around statusing that we got to follow. But again, that's a bit outside of the scope of this webinar, but you can see the advantage that I will have. So I'm just going to adjust some of my colors so I can actually see. So for example, if I go back to P1, which is in black, so I see the progress had happened here in period 1, progress period 2, and then also progress period 3, which is where I've now reached up to. Right? Now, there's also a methodology for entering the statuses and delays. Okay, so entering the statuses and delays into your program. All right. So I use code libraries. And again, we use it here. So I use code libraries to help label my EOTs and NODs in the Gantt chart. This allows us to filter very easily for any submitted NODs and EOTs and approved EOTs. All right. So in this case here, this EOT A, that I have them here, and I can just basically open a code breakdown structure. This allows me to see all of my approved EOTs in my program because I've assigned that code library there. Okay, good. All right, got a question here. All right. So I'm just going to answer one of the questions that came through in the webinar. Yes, you can actually, the question was, how can we link a set of activities at once? We can actually do that. And I'm going to just quickly demonstrate it here in this program. So I've entered the durations. I've selected all of them together. So I've just gone 1 to 6, add links, and we link tasks. And that's basically a finish to start relationship. And I'm just going to do a quick reschedule, and it's all FS. All right, so you basically got to select the first task, which is your predecessor, and then continue selecting them as you go. You can also do it in at separate times. I'm using a control key click. I'm just using a shortcut, which basically is control F2, and I'm going to reschedule, and that brings it back here. All right. Now these are items here have not been linked, so I could always link them again. And they're brought back in. All right. So you can actually do that. By default, it is all going to be a finish to start relationship. You just need to then do adjustments if you want to do a start to start, or finish to start with a lag on it, or finish to finish. So there are different options that you can do. Good. Right. So as you can see here for the statusing and baselining, what's going to happen when I do my statuses and baselining, I would actually be applying my basic sort of knowledge already in programming. I will have to go back in and do my updates. I'll have to reschedule them as a process. I will have to, and if I'm inserting EOTs into the program, that's similar as inserting a task there. I would apply my code libraries to it. Now, getting it approved also has to go through that whole forensic planning process where you don't update your contract program unless they have approved that EOT. So all of that we have to take in consideration, but the software is very useful for you to be able to see your impacted programs versus seeing your contract program, how it goes. In this case here, I have not put a baseline on this program, but I can always import the baseline from this program here and insert it into this one here as well. And then that is usually done via my baseline manager, which allows me to import the actual baseline. But again, I'm just conscious of not going too far too quickly when it comes to doing this whole setup of your baseline. There's a couple of rules that I look at, but the software is very useful for that forensic analysis part that I actually like about it, because I can actually then track my changes easier, because I can have multiple baselines and I can see where things are happening as well. Okay. Are there any more questions around this part of it? As I said, this is a very getting started with Powerproject, so there's a lot of quick things. I'm just showing you how I've utilized the software over time to help me out as I move from starting my program to now in my baselines and statusing. And what we want to look next is resources and costs. This is, I think, one of the most powerful parts of the software because it is very strong at what it does. All right. So I want to assign some resources and some costs to the program. Now I've already set them up in terms of my resource centers and my cost centers. And so I'm going to point out to you as well that you'll notice the software allows us to open more than one program at a time. That is going to be useful here when we start looking at our histograms, when I need to be checking my files and having a different view on my program. So when I have to basically assign, so if I need to basically assign a resource or a cost onto the Gantt chart, I can basically drag and drop them onto the Gantt chart. But one of the things I normally do here is we might want to change the type of resource in terms of calculated parameters. It will be beyond the scope of the webinar to go into all of the details about the calculations, but you can set up the calculations for your allocations, efforts, and durations. This makes the software very powerful when you need to do resource calculations and again working with cost planners. So for example, let us look at the demolition resources. All right. I'm setting from the permanent resources here in my project view to the left. All right. Properties. Now we can change the name and assign the calendar and set the maximum availability. So I'm going to change the calendar for the demo resource from that standard calendar here. And I'm going to assign my calendar that I wanted, which is a New South Wales 5-day public holiday plus SD calendar. Now I could actually drag the calendar from my previous file across here, but I just fixed it already. And because this here is the default calendar for this program. Now I've also assigned cost rates for the resource, including overtime rates if needed. Now the cost and income rates are assigned to cost centers for aggregated into cost histograms. So one of the things that we look at and think about is like, how do we tap into our cost center, especially with our accounting software? We sort of have to replicate it here in the software, but it makes it easier for us to be able to do your coding when you look at how your resources are calculated for the overall cost. Now under the assignment tab, I've set up the calculations for determining the allocations based on a specific parameter. Now I've used a linear resource allocation. Now we can use resource curve to adjust the peaks of the work. For example, do we have a front-loaded or back-loaded resource curve? A front-loaded resource curve means there's a lot more people working up front and then it dies down at the end, while the back-loaded, we start a slow uptake and then gets into a peak closer to the end of your task. All right. So if we look here, which I've created my resource and cost allocation table, the demo task is set for 10 days with a cost of $40,000 with 400 hours of effort by a 5-member crew. Because what I've done here in the demolition was saying that when we assign demo to any task, we usually assign an allocation of 5, even though I have a capacity of 10. All right. So that means every time I pull that, so if I assign another demo resource, they will pull another 5. And if I assign another one, and if they're all overlapping at the same time, it will let me know that I'm being over allocated. But I can always look at that through my resource allocation histograms. Now, if we look at the concreter assignment, the modeling is different. It's determined by the amount of work which is required for the ground floor slab. All right. That's gonna just scroll right here. That's it. So in this case here, so if we look at the ground floor slab, all right. So it's basically taking a work from tasks. So we have here 56,000 cubic meters of work to be done. So there's a work rate of 2,500 cubic meters per day. And that software calculates the work to be completed. It's just over about 5.5 days or 179 hours of effort at a cost of $18,420. Again, I do have my cost income rates here added in terms of what I'm going to be using for the concreter as well. Right. Basically, it should be an FR. I'm just using this particular resource in there. Now, this calculation will work in terms of utilizing this type of modeling is if you have your source data and you know how you're going to cost a job. Now, the software has different modeling approaches to account for your different costing approaches. And so that basically helps you to calculate it. And especially if you're going into sort of level 4 to level 6 level of detail, in terms of your program, you can actually go down to that level of granularity as well. At a EOI, high expression of interest, high level program, you may not go into that level of detail and you may just actually enter value there. But if you want to actually do a sort of calculation, you can set up those modeling aspects. And one of the things I said, coming from that MSP background, and I know some of us might be coming from MSP, is that resource calculations, that modeling is not there. If I had to do that, I would have to do a lot of programming in terms of writing code, whereas this already here is already set up for me to actually work with it, and I just need to manipulate my modeling, which makes it way easier for me to set up, do my resource allocations, and set up my costing. Now, we assign costs in a similar manner. All right, so I'm going to look at one of my costs here. Good. So we create our names for cost centers and set them up under master cost center. For example, I'm going to look at liquidated damages, which is a sub cost center under the contractual payments cost center, which is under the project cost master center. Now, additionally, what I can do as well is I can change the parameters for my cost allocation. I can change it based upon it being time-based, or it's going to be if it's fixed or task work based. I can also decide if I'm going to be calculating for cost or for an income. So I can create income centers, which is useful if I need to look at my net cash flow, look at when I get my inflows from my clients, and then where the outflows go out when I got to pay the subcontractors. Right? It can also be offset by delay relative to the task finish or to task start. Okay. It can also be, I can adjust that accrual period to point spend, which is a single payment, or resource curve allocations. The payments vary over time, and you could do things like from an S curve, that S curve could do a normal distribution, triangular. I'm going to quickly just show you some of it. If you're linear, you have offset triangles. So we have a lot of different resource curves. You can even make your own resource curve to assign it to. Right. Now, this is very useful because it helps the cost engineer or cost planners understand the cost allocation over the lifetime of the program. And what this is useful for is that you can have a better interaction with your project managers, your planners on the job, and your cost engineers for us to then be able to work off that same project file to get a costing data, to get a resource allocation, to actually get your schedule all from that same document, because everyone is talking off of that same document there. Now, what we want to do here is to pull up my resource and cost histograms. Now, I have the histograms at the base of my program already. So let me pull it into its own tab. This makes it easier to print and to issue to my cost planning team. Right? It's adjusting the timeline so we can actually see where everything is at. Okay, great. All right. So I can set up the properties of the histogram. And that's important for me to ensure it displays the correct data over the right scale. So I set my periods here. So my periods are set to elapsed months, which is calendar months. This is because we pay on a calendar monthly pay cycle. We assign the correct project calendar for the time scale. So this makes it area, all right? We also use the area because it makes it easier to see. If I had it as a line, it's a bit more difficult to see it here when it is set to a line. So I'm going to say area, and the legend name, I'm happy it's dollars, and I'm just going to put AUD as my currency units. Good. So that it knows it's Australian dollars. Okay. And so basically this is getting me here monthly cost over monthly period over time, and it is basically showing me end of the calendar year and each month, so I know what's hitting me, and I can also see my values here as well. Now I can move another histogram to the view. So here's for the concreter. All right. So I'm looking at the allocation, availability, and over allocation curves. Now I'm updating the properties of this histogram to show the correct data. So in this case here, I'm going to set it in. What I want to do is actually, I'm going to use project months instead of calendar months, but because it's lined up against the same histogram section as my project course, I will switch it back. I will switch it to elapsed months because it is easier to just work with a similar time scale. I will make sure I assign the right calendar to it. It's important to assign the calendars correctly. All right, good. And this is my data here, so I can actually see where my allocations are happening, right, over time. So this is my allocation in green. This is my capacity that I have, which is max 10 concreters. And if it was an over allocation, there was going to be a lot more. And what I would do here is I'm going to just make sure that the two histograms fit in the same space on the screen. Yes, we can do that. And then I can also set up a border file for printing this histogram. Because if I do apply my border file at the moment, the border file that I have set up for this is generally going to be child landscape. So, which is not the one I wanted to use, but again, it's similar to. So what I can do here is to actually set up my histograms, but it's actually pulling the histogram as set up for my DNC. So what I normally would do here in the program is that you actually have specific templates that the program you can use for the use of your histograms in terms of your various charts. And you can basically see here, I'm going to go with an A3 border landscape, which is sort of a default Elicosoft one here. But again, I will need to create one of that, which is a bit beyond for today's webinar, which we can discuss further in training. Right? Good. So I am again conscious of the time of making sure we're within that time frame here. Are there any other questions that we have so far? As I said, there's a lot of things to cover. I've practically done a quick run through of 3 separate modules of training of how I get started. So in my head of how I get across the software. I'm sort of, as I said, with my basics, with my programming checklists. Then I move on to forensically checking this correct, organize my baselines, run through my various sequencing. And then if I want to do my resource on costing, I set that all up first because we can do resource on costing into my program and then save it as a baseline and actually status and update my resourcing and costing allocations as I go forward. But as I said, that's a lot of things you can do with the software. It opens up the door for you to actually work with the software and actually tying a lot more people together. What I have not shown today, because it's a bit more involved, is actually utilizing, and we have done this in another webinar, is actually connecting this entire program to a BIM. All right. So if you have your IFCs for your job, you can then actually connect them and actually program there. So I can then start all again for my planning with my IFC model, and then basically assign my resource and costing to it, and then baseline it and able to do my statusing. So there are different approaches because you can come at this planning from Powerproject from different angles, and you're better able to then incorporate a lot more people. All right. So that's me so far for today. Are there any questions that you may have that I have not covered?
So then someone has asked like, how can they get access to New South Wales calendar? So yeah.
The New
Basically,
South Wales calendar in terms of in Powerproject.
Yes. So the calendar comes from the templates which you use. So Darren is using an Australian template, which I can forward to you via helpdesk. So I'll get in touch with you with regards to templates.
Okay, sure, we can do that.
Are there
Yes.
any more questions? All right. So looks like that's it. Thanks, Darren. Thank you everyone for attending.
Okay.
If you got any further questions, please feel free to contact Solid Support or reach to myself on helpdesk@solidsupport.com.au. Thank you very much and have a nice day.
Thank you.